So, gonna keep working through that, see if I can get it to work. If not, I'll just go on without it, I guess. Let's see. I'm gonna just push it this other way. See if we can get it to just go. One second. Maybe. There we go. Starting that up. Alright, looks like Facebook's working now. YouTube should be working. I'll try and watch the chat between the two. So, I will do my best to keep up between the two of them. Alright, where should we start? What are we talking about today? So today I got a river tour with a couple guests here, so we're going to keep this kind of short. I'm not going to go for a super long time. Probably go for maybe like an hour. I got to go do that at like 5 o'clock. So I'm not going to be on here for forever, but if you guys got questions, drop them in the comments. Spend most of the day just shuttling people this morning. People are at Brooks right now. We got 2 guides over there. Some people are fishing. We got some people bear viewing. So that's what we got going on today. And then this evening we got a river tour and dinner shuttles and stuff like that. We are right at the end of the season. We close on the 10th. Our last guest checkout on the 10th. It was a good season. Lots of bears, lots of fish, lots of good weather for the most part. You know, this last couple of weeks, there's been normal fall storms, but nothing that's prevented us from doing what we do. But definitely some windier days that happened over the last 10 days or so, and they'll continue to happen well through September, as that's kind of the rainiest, stormiest month that we see. So that's kind of where we're at so far. You know, looking forward to next season. I know there's people who are going to go back and rewatch this who are booked with us for next year. So excited to see you guys next year and get to have another fun season of bear viewing and flying and boating and fishing and all the kind of stuff that we do. So looking forward to all of that. So if you guys got questions, feel free to jump in there. There were a couple things I wanted to talk about today. and that way people who go back and rewatch this can also get to learn about some of these things. One of the things that we want to talk about is why 2 days might be better than 1 day at Brooks. I know that a lot of people that book with us, for the most part, get kind of coached into the 3 nights and 2 days is probably the better trip option. And 1 night and 1 day, or 2 nights and 1 day, can be kind of a challenge. I don't think we ended up with any full cancellations this season where we couldn't travel at all. But I did. We'll talk about a story about somebody. It was, I'm sure some of you are on that Katmai National Park Facebook page, and it had like last time I saw maybe 100+ comments about people conversing about a lady who posted about a story where she didn't make it, and that was because she. We'll get into the specifics of what happened there, but the point is that if you're booking for 3 nights and you have 2 full days at Brooks Camp, even if you end up with an abbreviated day on one of those 2 days, which did happen to some of our guests, you get out there at 11, you're there until 5 or 6 o'clock, and then you've got a whole nother day, and it's very rare that we end up with 2 days like that back to back. It does happen, but because people are, not everyone shows up on the same days and leaves on the same days, most of the time it doesn't happen to them. And even then, 2 abbreviated days is better than no days. And so that's why it's a really good idea to think about, if you're not already booked for 3 nights and 2 days, if it's in the budget or within the time allotment that you have for being here in Alaska, then it's probably a good idea to think about doing that. So that was one of the first things I want to talk about. And then the second one is the amount of walking that occurs at Brooks. I think people underestimate how much walking really occurs and how much time you're going to spend walking from one place to the other. People are always concerned about how much bear viewing time they get on the falls platform. And the reality is you're going to spend most of your time walking back and forth between the lodge and the beach and that kind of stuff, and actually waiting at the platform most of the time. On average, our guests walk between 4 and 7 miles at Brooks each day. And that's not like any strenuous hiking. That's not hiking out of Brooks Camp. That's just between the lodge, the falls platform, the different elevated walkways. 4 to 7 miles is pretty average. Like the bare minimum, you're going to walk 3 miles. Like if you're not comfortable walking 3 miles, probably should get comfortable walking 3 miles. There are some wheelchairs available if you've got like a mobility issue, but they're on a first come, first serve basis. So if you're coming on really busy dates sometime in the middle of July, there might not be one available when you get there. That doesn't mean you can't see the bears. There are certainly places to see the bears that don't require that much walking. But if you want to make the hike, the walk up to the falls platform, it is about 3 miles or so up and back. So just keep that in mind. I am going to try and keep track of this chat. So if you guys got any questions, feel free to drop them in there. I'm trying to watch both of them. For whatever reason, I can't see them on YouTube, so I apologize for that. I will see if I can hold it live up on a different channel where I can see or a different window where I can actually see the chat. Maybe 1 second so I can pull that up. Let's see. I gotta mute myself. Okay. Alright, I can see both chats now. So those are probably the 2 things that we really want to talk about. Let's see what we can pull up here. This one, cool. So we've got something else to look at. So yeah, those are really kind of some of the main things we want to talk about, are the walk-in, and then the other big one that came up this season a lot was, when's the best month? A lot of people come in July, and a lot of people come in August. I know people put off June and September, but the reality is that there's bears in both. And the typical July experience this year, what people are expecting, was not exactly what there's been in the past. The salmon run was a little bit different. There was a lot of salmon that made it to the Brooks River this year, and so the bear behavior was a little different. They didn't really fish the falls until August, and the people who were coming in August were expecting to not have as many bears on the falls. So just something to keep in mind. I know that we want to try and target best dates. based on historical patterns. But to be honest with you, and it's hard to, let people, express it to people that you really can come in anytime from middle to end of June all the way through September, and you're going to have a good bear experience. I mean, the people yesterday, and this is September 6th, saw 14 different bears, or they claimed 14 different bears. Either way, they saw 14 bears in different spots. Some of them may have been the same bear twice. And here we are in the first week of September, right at the end of the first week of September, and it'll continue to be that way for the next week or two, up until all the services end there at Brooks. And then getting there is a little more challenging. You can go after the 18th, 20th of September, but there's not as much going on out there. The lodge is closed. Getting out there typically requires a charter. Most people aren't. There's no more seat fares or guided tours out there to Brooks typically after the 20th. So that's just kind of the challenge if you want to travel late, which I'm happy to help you do, but just know that it's going to be reduced services compared to what you might be used to or what you were expecting if you were coming in September or August. And just something to keep in mind. So let's see, what else do we want to talk about? Oh, let's talk about the weather, because that's a good one. A lot of people ask, why are we flying? Why are we boating? Why can't we do this? Why are we doing that? What's the difference between the two? What is really happening? So this is probably more in depth than most people want to go, but I figure this is a good opportunity so that you guys can see how I plan and make the decisions about when and where we're going. So this is, spots we got the boats parked, but this is the King Salmon Airport over here, where you see this 10, and Brooks Camp is over here. And we're going to use just a more basic wind graph. So this is windy, wind on the lake. The waves can get very big on this lake. It's about, and we could measure it, but it's about 25 miles long, and at the widest point here it's like 6 to 7 miles wide. So the waves can certainly build here depending on the wind direction. Out of the south, obviously, you can expect some pretty nasty waves out here, and then they're not as bad over this way. But if it blows out of the east or the west, the waves on the lake can be quite large for a lake and can become incredibly uncomfortable and sometimes a little bit unsafe. So usually that's why most operators prefer to fly. There's nothing wrong with boating. We've done it both ways. Flying is a little bit faster, quite a bit faster actually, logistically, from King Salmon to Brooks than it is to take the boat or the water taxi. There's two landing options for the airplanes, whereas the boat's restricted basically to the Naknek Lake side down here on the lower end of the Brooks River. But the airplanes can land on this side, or they can land on this side of Brooks Lake. So if the winds are blowing out of the east, typically this is the better option. If it's blowing out of the south, then it depends on where exactly out of the south, but sometimes it could be either lake. And then obviously out of the north, both sides are protected from that, and from the west. But the lake, even if the winds are out of the west, the lake can still get pretty nasty. The next thing people talk about is the fog. Low ceilings typically don't affect boating, but they certainly affect flying. If we're below 500 feet, that's really kind of when you need to think about whether or not that is the right option for getting across to Brooks. So that's something to consider when you're deciding which option is better for you. We are not biased one way or the other. Our success rate comes from us being willing to transport people by whatever means necessary, whatever makes the most sense, and that's why we have the success rate that we do, because we don't pick if it's boat or airplane. We just go based on what the weather is going to dictate. Unfortunately, more often than not, if you're a boat person, it really is windy here often. 12 to 15 miles per hour is kind of where you need to draw the line on taking the boat across the lake. Even if it's still safe, it's incredibly uncomfortable in most cases and very slow, just to try and make it more comfortable. Whereas flying can be uncomfortable for some people. It's typically not unsafe, but people get motion sickness or they're afraid of small airplanes. But it is the only way to get to Brooks is to either take a boat or to fly. There are no roads to Brooks Camp or really into Katmai. It's not completely true. You can kind of get into Katmai on the road, but you'll just be inside the park boundary. You can't actually get to Brooks Camp by driving. So that is one of them. So then we're talking about ceilings. Yeah, anything below 500 feet for flying is it can be done probably, but you need, what you don't want to do is just take off and you get halfway there and you can't even get into Brooks, so you have to turn around and come back. So that's one of those, just one of those things where you got to consider that. And then fog can start all the way down at the ground, and we saw several days this year where the water taxi chose to be safe and not operate because they couldn't see on the lake, even though it's not the primary weather factor for water taxi or boating operations. Obviously, if you can't see it 100 feet in front of you, it's probably not a good idea, and so they end up delaying as well, just like the airplanes. Typically, the fog breaks out on the lake a little sooner than it does in king salmon, so the boat might start operating an hour or so ahead of time, but just remember it is basically 50 minutes across the lake, 45-50 minutes across the lake to Brooks Camp, so a lot of times by the time the weather does clear up, basically getting there at the same time. So we do use the boat to get across every once in a while, but we typically wait until we're like thinking we're not going to get there until afternoon. In that case, we make the switch and use whatever's more efficient, but ultimately flying's our preference. So those are the two real weather factors that need to be considered. Again, super unlikely that if you've got 2 days, you're going to encounter one or both of those 2 days in a row. It does happen. We're not going to pretend that it never happens, but it didn't happen this year. I think it happened maybe once last year, and it didn't happen the year before that. So it's kind of a toss-up, but it's the odds are definitely in your favor that it isn't going to occur to you on both days. It's got about a 100-day operating season, so it's unlikely that it happens while you're out there. All right, let's see what else we use to look at the weather. This is National Weather Service 99613 zip code for King Sam, in case you're wondering. This is a good place to look at the forecast if you're trying to predict your own. No, that's no good if we can't use that. Temperature and dew point are the two things we're looking at when we're trying to see if we're going to try and predict fog or mist. When those two touch and spend time together, typically at night or early in the morning, 2, 3, 4, 5 a.m. The more time those two, the dew point, which is the green line on this graph that I can't open, and the red line is the temperature, spend together, the more likely you are to encounter mist or fog. And if you have very little wind, there's a really good chance you're going to end up with fog in the morning. So that is how I look at and try and forecast my weather for operations the day before. Wind, I typically can get this from Windy, and I use this ECMWF model. It's I found pretty accurate for where we're at, and so that's what I use for predicting our wind stuff out here. And then forget the 7-day forecast, it changes too much to really use it, but you can use it basically for 24 hours ahead of time to try and predict fog. So that's kind of what we do. This one is an aviation 4-panel, and it's again just a forecast that lets me see lows. So these bars, the closer these are together, the windier it's going to be. It's going to spread out, so not too windy, but the backside of that storm could be bringing some pretty significant winds. Looks like out of the southwest, and then it's kind of moving. Looks like it's going to miss us and pass just to the south. It's really hard to read this map, but King Salmon's like right there if you can see my mouse. This is the aviation weather from the airport, and then there isn't official weather that comes from Brooks, so I use the explore.org cameras that face out towards the lake so that I can see what the weather conditions are out there. Although most of you guys cameras, this is the one that I have pulled up most often. And then there are no weather cameras available at the King Salmon Airport at the moment, but those are also helpful. So that is kind of how I deal with weather when we are in the operating season. Give me 1 second. I'm going to let me check the chat here real quick. So no questions in the chat there. No questions in this chat. Okay, cool. So let's see, what else should I? Okay, so we were going to talk about that gal's. Where'd my phone go? I want to pull up the story. See what actually happened to her. So she had a day trip. I think it was with Katmai Air. So I'm going to pull up that page real quick because I don't want to misquote the story. But I do believe that her day trip got canceled because she was on a day trip from Anchorage. Let's see, how do I sort these? I don't know how to sort these fast, I guess. I just gotta scroll through here and see if I can find it. But there's a lot of posts on this page, so it's hard to keep up. But if you guys aren't on the Katmai National Park, and it's got like the little squiggly mark Brooks Falls page, it's not run by the park. It's like a private Facebook group. You'll have to answer some questions to get in because people steal people's pictures off there and then post them in other groups. So they try to do something to try and keep people out of there and avoid the spam. It is a really good group if you like sharing pictures or seeing bear pictures, reading people's reviews from their experiences. It's not a bad page to be on. There's lots and lots of bear pictures, lots of screenshots of the explore.org cams. Let's see if we can find this story. But I guess while I look for it, the gist of the story was that she was on a day trip from Anchorage with, I believe, Katmai Air. And there's two parts to that trip. So they bring you into King Salmon and then they load you onto a float plane and fly you to Brooks. Usually, I don't think that they fly any float planes directly to Brooks. There are some operators that do. Katmai is not one of them, to my knowledge. And it's like around $1,300 to $1,400. I think $1,350, but around $1,400 a person to do it that way. And gonna get maybe 5 to 6 hours at Brooks, maybe 4 to 5 hours is probably more likely. So anyways, it was a foggy day, so they were able to get into King Salmon because those airplanes are using what they call an instrument approach. So they're flying with their instruments and not by looking outside, whereas the float planes are flying to Brooks using at least part of the flight when they're landing at Brooks. There's no instrument stuff out there, so they have to land by visual flight rules. So let's see. What would you say with those? I can't find her story, but so anyway, so she got to King Salmon, and then they waited and waited, and then it was like almost between one to the other takes so long. Getting back from King Salmon to Anchorage or Homer or Kodiak with the smaller airplanes, it's not a 50-minute flight; it's an hour to 2 hours basically. They end up needing to cancel because they're not going to have time to get you out to Brooks, and they've got other commitments for the airplanes for that day, and so they have to prioritize which flights they're actually going to run. So that's a big part of that. So keeping that in mind, which operator you use or where you use it from, or the day trips, which is typically day trips from places besides King Salmon are the ones that get canceled most often. And so you want to make sure that you're planning your trip accordingly. Like, it's okay if you want to do 2 day trips from Anchorage, you do it if that what fits your budget and your timeline. Just be aware that is the risk. But I wanted to find it because I had 100 comments probably talking about how it had happened to them, as people concurring with what happened to her, or also making suggestions on how to avoid that by staying in King Salmon, which is what a lot of people end up doing. They miss I can't find it. They miss the day trip on the first try, and they come back the next year or 2 years from then, and they say, "Oh well, okay, I'm just gonna do the day trip from Anchorage from King Salmon this time." And there's nothing wrong with day trips. I mean, day trips from King Salmon net you maybe between 6 and 8 hours. Some days it's 9 or 10. It really just depends on what the weather is and what the availability of aircraft are for that day. But that's basically what we tell people to expect is between 6 and 8 hours. And honestly, for most people, it's more than enough time. Longer than that can be too much for most people, especially if you're going more than one day, which we recommend in case you end up with a short day on the first day. So it's usually not a big deal to end up with that. So that's kind of what I would recommend there. Let's see. Got some comments here. I apologize. They didn't load right away. Is there a guide of the individual bears? How much the canvas for no numbers? Hey Shane, that's a great question. That looks like Michelle kind of answered it for me. And I'm going to answer your other question there, Michelle, because that's a really good one. The best way to kind of start to learn them, Shane, is to actually just watch the cams and get familiar with the really famous bears. I apologize if you're not here anymore. Like Chunk is the bear with the broken jaw this year. He was probably the more dominant male last year, and he still seems to be being relatively aggressive. Looks like he hasn't learned his lesson towards the other bears, and so they're reacting to him. So that's something to keep in mind as you're watching them. Just look like for identifying features. 747 had like really stubby ears. He hasn't been seen this year, to my knowledge. So you just like look for identifying features. Or Grazer is a big female, and she has one cub with her this year. That's a year old. So things like that. And the more you watch the cams and read the comments, another one is this Facebook page I was talking about. If you take a picture or a screenshot of the explore.org bear that you're wondering about and post there, typically there's someone with even more knowledge than myself in terms of which bear is which. But the Park Service book that Michelle's referring to here is good. So let's answer Michelle's question. If one way to get to Brooks is canceled, like the water taxi, how is it? Very incredibly difficult, Michelle. It's part of what we offer. Part of one of our services is that we basically handle that for you when you stay with us or book with us one of our bear viewing trips, or if you're staying with us here at the bed and breakfast, is that you don't need to worry about that. What happens is, let's say you are on the water taxi and it gets canceled. So their max capacity is 26 people per boat, I think, 26 or 25 people, I don't remember. And let's say you've got 3 full boats going that day. It's probably more spread out than that, but let's say they got 3 full boats. Now you've got 75 people who need a flight to Brooks, and most of the operators that are flying have already booked those seats, their seats for the day ahead of time. So there may be someone who can do it, but even if you had, most of these airplanes carry between 5 and 7 people most of the time. I know Katmai has a couple bigger otters. They might carry 5 to 7 people at most. So if you end up with 15 people, that's 3 extra flights that somebody would have to make if they were even able to do it and they're not already too time crunched to make it happen. So what would likely happen is that you might be able to find a charter flight. Now, the least expensive charter is going to be right around $1,500. So let's say you're 2 people, and now you're $750 a piece. Even if you get your money refunded from the water taxi, you're still $300 more if you can find an air taxi and charter an airplane and go on your own. And then they're probably already got scheduled stuff for the morning. So like basically between 7 a.m. and noon, they're going to have stuff planned. And then from 3 p.m. until 6 p.m., they're going to have stuff planned. So if you're able to get a charter, they're going to take you out at noon, and they're going to pick you up at 2 or 3 o'clock. Unless they've got room on one of those later flights where maybe they could squeeze you in. So that's really the risk on doing that. If it was easy, nobody would pay for our service. So a lot of people end up booking with us because we have good relationships with all those operators. And so we're able to, and we know who they are, and we know what the availability looks like, and we're able to make that transition really easily. If you're staying with us at the bed and breakfast, we own the equipment ourselves, and so we don't run into that issue where we need to find alternative options. Shane said we have booked for June. What are daylight hours roughly? Well, let's look, Shane. Those are probably the longest hours that we have is between is in June, right? So it's just after summer solstice. Daylight hours. Let's just go and look, because I don't want to tell you the wrong thing, but I'm pretty sure there's some long days in June. So, like, I think you are booked for around the 28th. So, total daylight, which I think I was right when I spoke with you on the phone, 18 hours and 19 minutes on the 28th of June. Daylight starts at 5:20 and ends at midnight. And then you've got twilight on either side of that. So not very much darkness in those dates at all. Versus, and then it does start to creep up pretty fast. You can, this is just a timeanddate.com, I guess. It's the first one I clicked on. You can kind of see, so we're in September now, we're only getting 13 hours of daylight. And we lose it pretty quick. Like once we're into October, now we're down to 10, and then November we're down to 8. And then right at some of the darkest part of the year there, in January, we're down to 6.5 hours of actual daylight, 10 to 4. Does Brooks stay open extended hours? I don't know that we spend about 8 hours over there, Shane, each day. Extended hours, I guess, is relative, but people got to get back we don't want to miss dinner and that kind of stuff. So normally, it's not, the platform does close each evening, and in the morning. It's closed early in the morning as well. So they don't extend their hours necessarily based on the light changes. Let me check the YouTube comments. A couple people watching there, but no questions from YouTube. What other questions can I answer? You guys got any questions? We went over a bunch of the weather factors. Let's measure the lake. I haven't measured the lake in a while. I want to be accurate when I'm telling you guys what I'm seeing. Let's measure the lake. So, let's see. Measure distance. Let's start. So the boats start. We'll just start them off the lake. And all the way to Brooks is. You got to go around this piece. So let's call it basically 27 miles. 25 into the beach. Yep, 27 miles basically, all the way. And then sometimes you got to take the southern route, which adds a little bit of time. So 30 miles if you got to take the southern route. There we go around that. Yep, it's just about 30 miles to Brooks if you got to take the boat. And then let's clear that. And then if you're flying, it's 32 miles, but the airplanes go between 90 and 100 miles an hour. The boat goes about 45 to 50. All right, see you, Shane. Thanks for stopping by. Let's see, Sharon. If weather problems arise while at Katmai causing early departure from Katmai, how would we be notified? Sharon, I think you're with me, if I remember correctly. That's the plan for one of our clients. So, if you're staying at the bed and breakfast, you have guides with you that are there. They're also my kind of on-the-ground staff. It's super unlikely. If we forecasted that there was going to be significant weather out there, Sharon, we probably would cancel it on this end if we thought we weren't going to be able to pick you up, because we definitely don't want that to be the case. While there are some yurts and tents and things like that in case of, a freak emergency, super, super rare. If you know it's going to blow 100 miles an hour and we're not going to be able to pick anybody up, we're just not going to send you. But if something did happen, there'd be a place for you to stay there. The park and the lodge take care of anything like that happens. But typically, so the coordinator who's in charge of your trip, or your guide if you're staying at the bed and breakfast and you paid for that additional service, they would be responsible for communicating that to you. Myself and the trip coordinator are usually on the ground actively each day, ensuring smooth operations. And so usually we'll fly out there and find everyone who needs to come back if they need to come back early. One of the things that we're implementing next year for our non-guided guests are that they'll have a lanyard that comes with your trip. And so if you feel like you need to put it on, and it'll help with your pickups regardless, so that they know and you know who's supposed to be going where. It'll have your pickup time on a little card inside of your lanyard, but your lanyard is how the pilots know that that's who they're supposed to be picking up, that you're with us. And in either case, someone will come find you and make sure that you get picked up and you don't get left behind. We've never left anybody behind before, and we're not going to start next year, so you will be taken care of, Sharon. Someone will come find you and make sure that you get picked up. That, and you can always check with the park service if the weather looks really crazy and something seems off. But usually people are pretty good about sending someone out there to pick people up and make sure that they don't get left behind. So unlikely that it happens, but that's how we handle that. Check these other comments. Do you know what altitude the float planes? Yes. So I fly to Brooks regularly for my guests here from the bed and breakfast. And typically, it's fun to get pushed by the wind and go kind of fast. So you might climb somewhere between usually 800 to maybe 3,000 feet. Anything more than that is excessive. The flight's pretty short. So the question for those of you guys on Facebook was, do you know what altitude the float planes get to during the flights to Brooks? They said Brooks Lodge, but Brooks Falls, Brooks Camp, Brooks Lodge, all the same place. Usually, so 500 feet is kind of the cutoff for the low end. If the ceiling is down that low, I would feel uncomfortable flying any lower than that. Absolutely had to. But usually something between 800 to 3,000 feet is going to be kind of the little altitude you're going to be at while you get over there. It is about a 25-minute flight. So hopefully that answers your question there. Let's see. Cool. So we've answered that question. If you got any more, feel free to drop them in the comments. Either side. So we measured the lake. We looked how far that was. Some people asked about, let's see, what else could I tell you guys about? So the Brooks River is pretty small. Oh, another question. A lot of people don't know this, but all the fish that go to Brooks, all the salmon anyways, and all the fish. So the Brooks River is not very long. It's a little over a mile between the two lakes. And all the fish that swim to Brooks, all the salmon you guys see, swim through the Naknek River. So they swim up this river. They call this the Rapids. Then up through here, past that last lodge, into the lake. And they typically follow the shoreline. They might cheat. The lake's not very deep for most of it. It's only about 30 to 40 feet deep through most of this part of the lake. There's a couple shallow spots out here in the middle. All the way around and then into the Brooks. So people ask, if the fishing, somebody asked me today, was the fishing good this year because of the amount of fish that were at Brooks? So this river, which is where the counting actually occurs, right in this area, is not necessarily representative of how many fish are actually at Brooks. So this number was pretty normal, between 1 million and 1.5 million, were the total number of sockeye salmon that escaped into the lake. But what happened was, for whatever reason, however many fish swam through on a particular day or set of days, a large number of those fish were destined for the Brooks River. So what happens out here commercially, so they're fishing out in the bay commercially, and sometimes they have openers and closures so that they can meet an escapement goal for fish going up into the lake. And on those particular days, the fish that got through on a closure or just a big push of fish happened to be destined for brooks. And so that's why this year we saw an enormous number of fish make it to the Brooks River instead of there's other rivers, like there's Marble Creek's back here. There's a bunch of little tributaries that are flowing into the lake. There's some in this lake over here in Johnny's Lake. There's a spot where the fish go over there. And there's a couple more on this side of the lake, on the south side, where the fish go. But in any case, the ones that made it to the brooks this year just happened to get through on a day when there weren't very many nets or lines in the water, and so we ended up with a ton of fish at brooks. So just kind of going over how that happened. Check these Facebook or YouTube comments. Hopefully we answered those questions. Let's see. I'm going to move this over. Cool. So that's kind of how that worked out. Are there any more questions? I gotta jump off here, I think, and start to get ready for the afternoon. But if there's any more questions, I'm happy to answer those. Check the comments here for another minute. Hopefully I answered most of everybody's questions. Check YouTube. No other comments there. But yeah, so anyways, if any other questions come up, feel free to drop them in the chat or send me a message on Facebook. Shoot us an email, and I can answer any questions you guys have that way. But this is kind of just look at the lake there. So, yep, you got to get ready for the afternoon. We'll do more of these over the coming weeks. I know lots of people will be starting to think about how to plan this trip for next year or in 2027. So, happy to do that for you guys. We'll do a more structured Q&A. I'll actually show you how to put the trip together, and I'll send an email out for that. So if you're not on the email list, feel free to stop by on one of the websites and fill out an inquiry form, and you'll get added to that list, and I can make sure you get notified when we do our next Q&A. But that is basically it for today. So thanks for stopping by. If you guys are rewatching this and you have questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. I will get back to them. Cool. Thanks, guys. Have a